right now, in the unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a 100,000-ton, 1,092-foot-long marvel of modern warfare is slicing through the black water at over 30 knots. Up on the sprawling 4.5-acre flight deck, $70 million supersonic FA-18 E Super Hornets, each armed to the teeth with up to 17,750 pounds of laser-guided munitions, are violently catapulted from 0 to 170 miles per hour in just 2 agonizing seconds. These mechanical beasts pull crushing G-forces, projecting absolute American dominance across the globe. But beneath this $13 billion spectacle of aviation mastery, a hidden, almost dystopian society of 5,000 souls operates in the shadows. While commanding officers enjoy the quiet luxury of climate-controlled, private staterooms, the reality for the ship's most vital workforce is a claustrophobic nightmare. These are the junior enlisted sailors, ranks E1 through E4, barely out of high school, yet entrusted with maintaining nuclear reactors and arming million-dollar missiles. They are the undeniable, blood and sweat backbone of the United States Navy, enduring conditions that the recruiting brochures deliberately leave out. Plunge deep into the freezing steel bowels of the ship. They sacrifice every ounce of personal comfort to keep this Leviathan breathing. How do these 18-year-old kids survive months trapped inside a sensory overload pressure cooker while operating the most lethal military hardware in human history? Let's plunge into the suffocating, unseen depths of America's floating fortresses. Our descent into this hidden underworld begins at the exact place where an exhausted sailor's grueling day ends the berthing compartment. To call this space merely cramped is a laughable understatement. It is a masterclass in extreme, weaponized human confinement. Up to 60 strangers are violently thrust into a single, windowless metal cavern, forced to coexist, sweat, and breathe the exact same stagnant air. Here, the concept of personal space is completely annihilated, and surviving the psychological crush demands an unbreakable mental fortitude. Forget the luxury of a comfortable bed. These young warriors are assigned to sleep in claustrophobic coffin racks, stacked ruthlessly 3 levels high. If you are cursed with the top rack, your nose is practically scraping the freezing, condensation-slicked ceiling of the ship's ventilation ducts. If you draw the bottom, you are subjected to the relentless, thunderous echoing of combat boots vibrating through the steel deck just inches from your spine, measuring a pathetic 30 inches wide with only 18 inches of vertical clearance. These metal slots make sitting up physically impossible. Your entire existence for an agonizing 9-month combat deployment must be mathematically crammed into this microscopic, unforgiving void. A razor-thin, flame-retardant mattress and a flimsy privacy curtain are your only meager defenses against a room full of exhausted, snoring shipmates. Every uniform, every heavy boot, and every fragile photograph from home must be ruthlessly shoved into a single shallow pan beneath your mattress and one slender locker. On a Nimitz-class carrier, you do not own a bedroom, you simply occupy a dark, temporary sliver of steel, buried dangerously deep below the waterline. These berthing compartments are entirely devoid of portholes, sunlight, or any connection to the natural world. Sailors are plunged into a disorienting state of perpetual midnight, their biological clocks shattered by the relentless, eerie glow of red tactical lighting. The heavily recycled air they breathe is thick, carrying the permanent, metallic stench of JP5 aviation fuel, ozone, and unwashed coveralls. Without glancing at a digital watch, a sailor has absolutely no idea if they are waking up to a sunny morning or a pitch-black ocean storm. Silence is a mythical, non-existent concept on a warship, powered by 2 violent A4W nuclear reactors and 4 massive steam turbines. A low, bone-rattling hum permeates every single inch of the hull, 24 hours a day, practically shaking the fillings in your teeth. Directly overhead, 50,000-pound jets slam into the steel arresting cables with the force of a localized earthquake, violently rattling the bulkheads, even with dense foam plugs jammed deep into their ear canals. These exhausted sailors must learn to sleep through the apocalyptic Symphony of War. The sheer misery is exponentially compounded by the grim reality of the shared head, a single, heavily utilized bathroom serving dozens of men, exhausted, grease-stained machinists' mates, and aviation boatswain's mates must brutally compete for a handful of sputtering showers and temperamental stainless steel toilets. There is zero dignity or privacy left when you are forced to strip off chemical-soaked coveralls, shoulder to shoulder with your division. Securing a lukewarm, 2-minute Navy shower after a grueling 16-hour shift is considered an absolute, undeniable luxury. But if you think surviving this psychological pressure cooker is the hardest part of their brutal existence, wait until you witness the lethal, mind-bending gauntlet they must run the second they step onto the deadliest workplace on the planet. Stepping out of the suffocating coffin racks doesn't offer salvation. It merely trades a claustrophobic cage for a high-speed meat grinder. Life aboard a $13 billion Nimitz-class carrier operates on a ruthless, unforgiving 24/7 combat rhythm that obliterates the human concept of time. Junior enlisted sailors are violently thrust into 6 hours on, 6 hours off, watch rotations that exist only in theory, as mandatory damage control drills and back-breaking maintenance devour their so-called rest. From the second the colossal anchor is weighed, weekends, holidays, and regular sleep schedules are entirely erased from their biological hard drives. For the aviation boatswain's mates, the nightmare begins with an agonizing vertical climb through a maze of steep, grease-slicked steel ladders. They transition from the stale, refrigerated air of the lower decks into a solid wall of suffocating humidity and apocalyptic noise. Stepping through the massive, watertight bulkheads onto the sprawling 4.5-acre flight deck is like stepping onto the surface of a hostile, alien planet. This is universally recognized as the single most dangerous industrial workplace on Earth. A chaotic chessboard where a split-second lapse in focus doesn't just result in an injury, it results in a closed casket funeral. The sheer sensory violence of the flight deck assaults every nerve ending simultaneously, demanding absolute perfection in a landscape of pure chaos. Searing exhaust from a $100 million of 35C. Lightning II reaches a staggering 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit. A localized inferno capable of melting flesh and carbon fiber in seconds. The invisible hurricane-force jet blast can effortlessly launch a 200-pound sailor off the non-skid deck, hurling them into the unforgiving ocean 60 feet below. Meanwhile, the cavernous engine intakes create a localized vacuum so terrifyingly powerful it can suck a human being into spinning titanium turbine blades before they can even scream. To orchestrate this terrifying ballet of mechanized slaughter, the Navy relies on a brilliantly colored, high-stakes visual language. Every sailor braving the flight deck wears a brightly colored jersey, colloquially known as the Rainbow Wardrobe, which instantly broadcasts their specific lethal responsibilities. Yellow shirts are the authoritative aircraft directors, the choreographers guiding multi-million-dollar beasts with nothing but complex, illuminated hand signals. But it is the lowest-ranking sailors, draped in red, green, purple, and blue, who actually perform the grueling hands-on labor inside the kill zone. The aviation ordnance men, clad in blood-red jerseys, bear one of the most terrifying burdens in the entire United States military arsenal. These sleep-deprived 19-year-olds are tasked with manually wrestling highly volatile, live munitions onto the wings of screaming fighter jets. While engines deafen them and the steel deck violently vibrates, they hoist 500-pound GBU-12 Paveway, 2 laser-guided bombs and arm AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles. One dropped casing, one static spark, or one misinterpreted signal while handling these catastrophic weapons could instantly vaporize half the flight deck. Perhaps no job demands more raw, unfiltered nerve than the green shirts. The catapult and arresting gear crews who literally hold the pilot's lives in their grease-stained hands. To hook a 44,000-pound F/A-18E Super Hornet to the massive Mark 7 steam catapult, a junior sailor must physically crawl underneath the roaring aircraft. With the jet's twin engines at maximum military power, glowing orange with raw thrust. The sailor frantically attaches the steel catapult shuttle to the nose gear, kneeling inches from a flesh-incinerating exhaust nozzle. They trust their lives entirely to a pilot's brakes and a single wire. Then there are the grapes, the aviation fuel handlers wearing distinct purple jerseys who wrestle with thousands of gallons of highly combustible JP5 jet fuel. They conduct the terrifying ritual of hot refueling, pumping explosive liquid into aircraft while the engines are still running to drastically cut down combat turnaround times. Dragging massive, heavy fuel hoses across a slippery, oil-slick non-skid deck in pitching seas is physically agonizing work. Saturated in toxic fumes, they operate with the chilling knowledge that a single rogue spark from a catapult track could ignite an uncontrollable, ship-killing infernos. The mechanical beasts are only half the battle. These junior sailors must also wage a relentless, unwinnable war against the elements. During combat operations in the Persian Gulf, ambient flight deck temperatures can soar past 130 degrees Fahrenheit, literally baking the sailors alive inside their heavy cranial helmets and float coats.
Conversely, during Arctic Circle deployments, they are battered by blinding snowstorms, freezing sleet, and massive rogue waves that violently crash over the bow. There is no canceling flight operations for a blizzard. When the mission dictates, these teenagers endure nature's absolute worst without a single complaint. Before the first lethal payload even leaves the deck, every single day begins with an exhausting, mandatory ritual known as the FOD walkdown. Hundreds of sailors line up shoulder to shoulder, eyes glued to the rough, non-skid surface, meticulously scanning for foreign object debris. A stray bolt, a dropped piece of safety wire, or even a microscopic pebble sucked into a $15 million Pratt & Whitney engine can cause a catastrophic internal explosion. It is a tedious, mind-numbing task, but this grueling attention to microscopic detail is the only shield standing between a successful strike mission and a fiery disaster. While the flight deck is a highly visible theater of adrenaline and danger, another breed of junior sailor fights a completely different, unseen war. Deep in the dark, suffocating bowels of the ship, the snipes labor in engineering spaces where ambient temperatures regularly hit an agonizing 120 degrees. They maintain the complex maze of high-pressure steam valves, water distillers, and electrical grids that keep the nuclear Leviathan from dying in the water. They are the forgotten heroes, stripped of the flight deck's glory, toiling in a subterranean hellscape to ensure the heartbeat of the carrier never falters. But while the daily combat grind tests their physical endurance to the absolute limit, an even darker, more insidious threat waits for them when the ship finally returns to port a hidden, psychological nightmare so profoundly broken that it recently forced the Navy into a shocking national scandal.
When a $13 billion nuclear supercarrier finally survives a grueling combat deployment, the public pictures a glorious homecoming and a well-deserved rest. The brutal, unspoken reality for junior enlisted sailors, however, is a forced descent into a bureaucratic hellscape officially known as the Refueling and Complex Overhaul, RCOH, docked at the colossal, sprawling Newport News shipbuilding facility in Virginia. The proud warship is violently gutted to replace its spent uranium fuel rods. But instead of being relocated to proper military housing, thousands of E-1 to E-4 sailors are held hostage aboard a freezing, apocalyptic construction site. At sea, the Nimitz-class carrier is terrifyingly alive, humming with the purposeful, unstoppable energy of its twin, I-4W nuclear reactors. In the dry dock, that comforting heartbeat is completely flatlined, replaced by the deafening, chaotic screech of industrial angle grinders and the toxic stench of arc welding. The ship's critical life support systems, ventilation, internal heating, and running water are routinely and violently severed by civilian contractors without a single moment's warning. For the lowest-ranking sailors, the proud title of combat warrior is stripped away, replacing their dignity with the soul-crushing reality of becoming glorified janitors in a pitch-black steel maze. This horrific scenario was not just a theoretical hardship. It evolved into a lethal, national disgrace aboard the USS George Washington, CVN-73. Between 2017 and 2023, this mighty nuclear titan became a literal floating tomb of despair during its agonizingly prolonged overhaul period. Junior enlisted sailors were explicitly ordered to live deep inside the ship's gutted hull, while heavy machinery mercilessly ripped the vessel apart entirely around them. They were subjected to freezing Virginia winter temperatures with absolutely zero internal heating, relying on dangerous contraband space heaters just to survive the night in their metal coffin racks. The physical conditions aboard CVN-73 rapidly devolved into a grim, unlivable scene straight out of a dystopian horror film. With the ship's massive ventilation systems completely disabled, the suffocating berthing compartments filled with hazardous industrial dust, pulverized insulation, and the acrid smoke of burning metal. When the aging plumbing inevitably failed, thousands of exhausted teenagers were left without functioning toilets or access to a single drop of clean running water. They were breathing a highly toxic atmosphere, navigating debris-filled, pitch-black corridors with flashlights, and utterly abandoned by the military bureaucracy they swore to defend, desperate for even a shred of basic human relief. Some junior sailors were temporarily relocated to a dilapidated off-base housing facility known as Huntington Hall. But this promised sanctuary was nothing more than another horrific, soul-crushing exercise in extreme, unsanitary military confinement. Rooms fell shockingly below the Department of Defense's own minimum habitability standards, cramming exhausted sailors into claustrophobic spaces, offering a pathetic 85 square feet per person. Yet, even this miserable, overcrowded concrete block was a fleeting luxury that the Navy was about to violently rip away from them. The psychological breaking point arrived when another nuclear titan, the USS John C. Stennis CVN-74, arrived at Newport News for its own complex overhaul.
In a staggering, unforgivable display of bureaucratic cruelty, the George Washington's junior sailors were unceremoniously evicted from Huntington Hall, simply to make room for the new arrivals. They were ordered to pack their meager belongings and march straight back onto the freezing, unlivable construction zone of CVN-73. There was no escape, no reprieve, and no sunlight, just an endless, suffocating loop of industrial noise and utter agonizing isolation. You can push a battle-hardened, 18-year-old combat sailor to the absolute brink of human endurance, but the human psyche will eventually, inevitably, shatter. The toxic combination of chronic sleep deprivation, freezing temperatures, and a total loss of operational purpose triggered an unprecedented, lethal mental health crisis within the lower ranks. Between 2019 and 2023, 9 young men and women assigned to the George Washington sailors who had proudly sworn an oath to defend the Constitution tragically died by suicide.
They survived the lethal, high-stakes chaos of the open ocean, only to be systematically broken by a dry dock ship in their own home country. What makes this tragedy infinitely worse is the agonizing bureaucratic stonewall these desperate sailors faced when begging their command for psychological help. Requesting a mental health evaluation often meant navigating a labyrinth of red tape, enduring months-long wait lists, and facing the silent, career-ending stigmas of being labeled unfit for duty. Junior enlisted personnel were effectively trapped in a cold, unfeeling system that prioritized the overhaul schedule of a massive hunk of steel over the fundamental survival of its human crew. The Navy's highest leadership was eventually dragged before Congress, publicly admitting to a catastrophic, systemic failure of leadership. The resulting scandal forced immediate, highly publicized reforms, increased mental health funding, strict limits on onboard living during maintenance, and enhanced housing stipends for junior sailors. But for the grieving families of those 9 fallen heroes, these policy changes are a hollow, agonizingly delayed victory written in blood. The tragedy of CVN-73 exposed a dark, uncomfortable truth about the military-industrial complex that slick Hollywood recruiting commercials will never dare to show. Sometimes, the deadliest enemy a junior sailor will ever face isn't a hypersonic anti-ship missile in the Pacific, but the crushing indifference of their own chain of command. But surviving the lethal flight deck And the psychological torture of the shipyards is only half the battle. How do these broken, exhausted teenagers actually feed their bodies and rebuild their fractured souls when they are completely cut off from the rest of humanity deep inside the ship's blistering core? Culinary specialists wage a relentless 130-degree war against starvation. They must conjure up to 18,000 high-calorie meals every single day, battling industrial ovens and sheer physical exhaustion to keep the crew alive. Meals here are not a luxury, they are frantic. 10-minute refueling pit stops where exhausted teenagers aggressively shovel down calories before sprinting back to their duty stations. They are actively sustaining the heartbeat of American naval supremacy, one powdered egg at a time.
How do you feed this ravenous Leviathan when it is hunting in the remote Philippine Sea? The answer is a terrifying, high-stakes maritime operation known as underway replenishment, universally feared as UNREP. A 49,000-ton supply ship pulls a mere 150 feet away, violently firing heavy steel cables across the churning ocean abyss to zip line pallets of bombs and frozen beef. These 19-year-olds execute this lethal tightrope walk in blinding rainstorms, knowing a violently snapped tension cable could instantly slice a human being in half. Feeding the flesh is a logistical miracle, but preserving the mind is a devastating psychological war. When a carrier strike group enters highly contested kill zones, command initiates condition River City a total, unforgiving communications blackout to perfectly mask the ship's digital signature. For agonizing weeks, junior sailors are violently severed from the outside world and left entirely blind to emergencies unfolding back home.
During this crushing isolation, the survival of a sailor's soul rests entirely on the miraculous arrival of a delayed canvas bag of analog mail. To survive this weaponized isolation, these junior enlisted warriors forge an unbreakable, trauma-bonded brotherhood that civilian society could never comprehend. In forgotten, violently vibrating pump rooms and dusty ventilation shafts, they carve out hidden sanctuaries to escape the crushing weight of military rank. Here, they share hoarded civilian candy, quietly rebuild each other's shattered psyches, and fiercely refuse to let their shipmates fight the darkness alone. This profound respect is even mirrored by Navy brass during Thanksgiving, when four-star admirals don white aprons to personally serve turkey to these exhausted E1s and E3s. Enduring this grueling meat grinder violently transforms these kids into hardened, elite sentinels of freedom, earning their Enlisted Aviation Warfare Specialist EAWS pin is a permanent, physical manifestation of their immense suffering and undeniable triumph. That silver medal proves they conquered the most unforgiving, lethal industrial environment on the face of the earth. They have flawlessly operated multi-million-dollar weapon systems under catastrophic conditions that would mentally shatter the average civilian within hours. The next time you see a Hollywood-produced news segment about America's invincible carrier strike groups, look past the supersonic jets and gold-braided commanders. Remember the exhausted machinist's mate in the blistering engine room and the young ordnance man wrestling live explosives in a midnight squall. They are the invisible, unshakable titans, silently trading their youth so the rest of us can sleep in peace. If this harrowing journey changed how you view our military heroes, hit subscribe, share this video, and drop a proud in the comments to ensure their sacrifices echo through eternity.